Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hidden Gems podcast. This is the show where we like to look at a streaming service and we talk about some hidden gems that are on that service. We have a lot of fun. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and Ryan is here.
Hey, Rachel, it's great to be back with you on Halloween week. This is one of my favorite times of the year, and then October just went away like it was like that. Like it was so fast.
Yeah, it was jam-packed. I did 2 trips and then, the preparation and recovery from the trips. And yeah, so it did go pretty fast for me too.
Yeah, not to mention it seemed like Hollywood was just like, we released nothing in 2020. Let's just put them all in October. It's like no Time to Die, Dune.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Dune, what are we going to talk about today?
Oh, we're going to be talking about HBO Max and
Yes.
where Dune is already on there. It's been seen by a lot of people, and Dune 2 has already been confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, you think that they were really kind of like, I mean, I guess maybe if it had really bombed, but I feel like they were probably going to make the movie regardless. But just to have something more content for HBO Max at this point.
I was preparing for the worst. However, there was a small part of me that's like, maybe there's a chance, because Dune is so loaded that they couldn't have told the entire story in one movie. They tried in '84, and
Right.
while I love that movie for what it does best, what I recognize that it doesn't do so well is that it loads it up with everything. Like, I'm just glad, and I hope in chapter 2 we get sound as a weapon and the water of life, and we get to see more of Dave Bautista as the Beast Raban, and we see more of the Baron Harkonnen, and just there's so much stuff. And Lady Jessica is still pregnant, and that whole thing is going to be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad I'm been like floating like the Baron Harkonnen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, as just a bonus, this obviously a hidden gem. Dune is a huge movie. But let's talk a little bit about how we felt about the film. So for me, I'm not that big into sci-fi. I absolutely hated the novel. I'm not a fan of the 1984 film. So I went into this with moderated expectations, you might say. And I did end up, I guess, recommending the film. I don't think it's really like my cup of tea or something I'll ever want to watch again, except for maybe before I see the second one, part 2. But I can recognize that it did about, I think, as good a job as you could do in telling the story of Dune. And so people that are interested in that story and that are fans of it, they, I think, succeeded. You have to judge something for what it's trying to be, in my opinion, as a critic. I can't judge Paw Patrol, the movie, the same way I'm judging Candyman or or a horror movie that I might see, or something that's or Dune. They're all, you have to look at it with, like, sure, yeah, you have your, like, if there's something I completely hated, then that's one thing, but I didn't hate it. It was fine. I liked it fine. It was a little slow. The characters are kind of flat, in my opinion, but like, if they had made the characters different, then they wouldn't be Dune. This is the way the characters are in the book. And so, like, how much do you change it in order to make it more cinematic? And they would lose what it is that, people like about it. And so I don't know. I think that as a critic, I have to ask myself, what is it trying to do? And did it do it well? And I would say that it did about as well as you could make Dune. That's how I felt. Basically, it is what it is. If you don't like Dune, you're not going to like this. But if you like Dune, you're going to like it. So I gave it a marginal review. It's a beautiful looking movie, of course, and all the performances are good. But yeah, it's a slow sci-fi film about diplomacy and leadership and loyalty, and that's what it is. What did you think?
Well, I'm kind of the opposite. I love the '84 version. It's not perfect. I recognize its flaws, but there's like 1,000 times more effort put into that than I kind of love for it. And so there was a part of me that when this was announced, I was like, they're remaking Dune, okay. And then when I heard Denis Villeneuve's name, I'm like, it's gonna be good. And it surpassed even my expectations. I adored this movie. I took my dad to see it, who is a big Dune fan, and we walked out of there. We were like, that was the spice. That really was. And I'm freely willing to admit that if you don't like Dune, I get it. It's hard work. It's a lot of just stuff and to understand. And I'm not trying to be condescending or anything of the sort. I'm just saying that it's very heady material. So if you
Mhm.
don't get it, I do understand. However, this is my jam. Like when like there were several parts of the movie where I'm just like, wow, this is just so beautiful. Like there there's just from big moments like the sandworm, like wow, they made the sandworm look just incredible. Like you only see like the front of it, or at least its maw, but when you do see it, it's like the most scariest thing you've ever seen. It's just it's like the shark from Jaws. It's like this open mouth and it's like ah, and you're just like mm. And when it eats the spice, the spice miner, it's not like a like it goes up and eats it and goes down. It's like it takes its time and it just like yeah, it takes its
Yeah.
time. It's
I
just
mean, it definitely is a beautiful looking film. There's no question. I don't know how anybody could deny that. I do think towards the last part of the movie, it starts to get kind of muddy looking. There's just a lot of the sandstorms, and it just all just sort of starts to feel kind of gray. So it loses some of its visual splendor, I think, in the last third of the film. But nevertheless, it's still a beautiful and a magnificent accomplishment as far as the filmmaking. And like I said, all the actors do a good job. I think if you're going to take Paul as a chosen one character, he's pretty low in my ranking of those kind of characters, I would say. I mean, I just don't think he shows the same kind of growth, and we don't get as attached to him as someone like a Luke Skywalker or a Harry Potter or these kinds of characters. He's not as interesting, and they do what they can, but I don't think any of the characters are as interesting. There's like Jason Momoa's character tries to be kind of the Han Solo of the movie, but I don't think he's anywhere close to that kind of charisma. Or even, in my opinion, even in Oscar Isaac, we're going to talk about in our best and worst in the sequels. There's just that charisma. Of course, Oscar Isaac's in this, but that charisma that Poe has in those movies, I just don't think there's anything like that here in Dune. But Dune isn't really about the characters. It's more about like leadership and loyalty and colonization and those kinds of themes more than it is about the characters.
well, I think I think it goes a lot deeper than that, and I think that's why I'm so happy that Dune Chapter Two is happening because I think all the complaints about the characters being kind of flat, I think will be resolved as we get into number two because as the story continues, Paul just gets better and better and better. Like he's eventually going to be able to ride the sandworm and going to use sound as a weapon and he's just going to become the leader of the Fremen. And so and it's gonna be fantastic. So I think chapter one, as much as beloved by most as it is now, it's going to be looked on even better in the hindsight with two and three if they end up doing one, which I
Mm-hmm.
hope so in order to cram everything in. But overall, it's my favorite movie of the year so far. It topped No Time to Die, and I
Mm-hmm.
fully respect and understand that not a lot of people are going to get this. Like I said, Dune is hard work, but but I just love it. I've loved every
Mm-hmm.
second of it.
Cool, great. Yeah, I did go fresh on it, so that's that's something. So,
Also,
uh, our
also shout out to Stellan Skarsgård for crushing it as Baron Harkonnen. Like he was terrifying. Is-
yeah, he was definitely memorable. I'll say that for sure. All right. Well, uh, so you would you give it a 5 out of 5? Perfect.
yes,
5 out of 5.
and
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
I
Okay.
will die on that hill.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about our picks. Now that we've talked about Dune, share with us in the comment section what you think about Dune. We would love to hear. And yeah, let's talk about some hidden gems on HBO Max.
All right, let's
I will
go.
start. The very first one that I wanted to talk about is a documentary. It's called Nuclear Family. And this is directed by a woman named Rai Russo Young. And she was the daughter of a lesbian couple in the 1980s, and then I think it was 95, I forget. Um, they ended up getting her moms got sued by the sperm donor for custody, and it became this big case, this big thing that you had these, lesbian women that had 2 children. What were the parental rights as far as them versus this, biological rights, all this stuff. And so she interviews all the different people that were involved. Obviously, she has personal feelings about it because she was the child that was in question as far as custody. And so I thought it was really good. I thought it was really interesting to see where we've come since then, and to see just this family and how this impacted the community and the family and her sister. And it's a 3-part docu-series on HBO Max that I really thought was good. I think they're going to be making a feature film narrative based on it. So I look for that in probably Oscar season, before we know it, with like Julianne Moore, Amy Adams. I could see that now. But yeah, it was very interesting and sweet in a lot of ways and sad in a lot of ways. So I recommend it. It was really good.
You said this was based on a true story?
Yeah, it's literally her. It happened to her mom's. Like she was the child that was the director was the child that was being sued for custody.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very personal, of course.
I can only
So,
imagine.
and she also got to know her biological father, who sued for custody, in a way that she hadn't known before because he had made all these tapes and she'd always refused to watch the tapes. And she was angry and bitter what he'd done to her family. But then through making the film, she kind of grew to forgive him, which was also a sweet part of the whole thing. It was really good.
Hate carries a heavy burden.
Yeah. So Nuclear Family, and it's by director Rai Russo Young. What's her name? What is your first choice?
All right, so my first choice is from 2004, and it is called Collateral. It tells the story of a hitman played by Tom Cruise who is in Miami to do a job. And he kind of kidnaps a taxi cab driver played by Jamie Foxx and basically tells him to drive him to his various locations. And while all of this is going down, Jamie Foxx gets basically tied up in the whole craziness of the of this hit, and it all takes place in one night. This was directed by Michael Mann, and who he would go on to go on. He had directed Heat beforehand, and is a very accomplished director. And I watched this kind of on a whim. I had actually found the DVD in my library, and I was like, I've heard nothing but good things about this. I wonder what it's like. And sure enough, I sat down to watch it and I loved it. I loved everything about it. But Tom Cruise with gray hair, who would have thunk? And he, as for somebody who is primarily known as being, very charismatic and very likable. Here, he has a very dark edge to him. So it's a bit of a weird turn for him, but he makes it work. And Jamie Foxx is good in here as well. He's kind of he's he's more of the straight man to all of this and what's going on. He's basically our window into this whole thing, and he reacts how we all would probably react in a situation like this. And there's actually quite a few moments of levity where there's this one scene where Tom Cruise is like he's like trying to diffuse a situation where Jamie Foxx has been held at gunpoint, and he's like, "Hey, homie, like that's my drug." It's funnier in the context of the movie,
Mhm.
but it's really funny because Cruise in the movie is such a measured character, and so to have to deviate from the whole shoot first, shoot second, shoot a little more, and then ask questions is quite fascinating. And so I've always loved this movie, and I do recommend it.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I've never seen it, but I've only ever heard people say it was really good and one of his better roles. So one of these days I'll have to check it out. Maybe when we do a Ryan picks for Rachel to watch, I'll have to give it a watch.
Yeah,
Because
it's not too terribly violent,
Mhm.
so I think it would definitely be for you.
Cool. Well, my next pick is a movie from just last year, and I feel like it's already gotten forgotten. It got kind of snubbed in the Oscars, didn't really get a whole lot of attention. But it's News of the World by Paul Greengrass, and I really like this movie. It is kind of a little bit of slower pace, but it stars Tom Hanks as this man who goes around and he does a performance where he tells everybody the news going on, and he ends up meeting this little girl, and he decides to help the little girl. And my favorite part about the whole movie is this whole long sequence where there's the shootout on the hill, and I thought it was so tense and so well done, and very. I mean, the whole movie is just beautiful, gorgeous, and I think Tom Hanks is good. The little girl, Helena Zengel, is very good. So yeah, if you can handle a little bit of a slower paced film, I think you'd enjoy it. I'm normally not a big Westerns fan, but this I liked. It just had such ambiance and a likable leading character, and I liked the relationship. I always like stories of unlikely friendship, and here you have between Tom Hanks and this little girl. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I saw this literally New Year's Day 2021, and I had no idea what to expect because it was directed by Paul Greengrass, and I'm a big fan of his. So I didn't know what to expect. And when I walked out, I was like, that was good. But then the more I thought about it, the more it kind of grew on me, and now I do really enjoy this one.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
there's a great action scene where it's Tom Hanks against these two uh, cowboys who are after them. I'm sure Rachel, you know the scene I mean, where
Yeah,
they
the
run,
shootout scene.
yeah, they run out of bullets, and like Tom Hanks sees the quarters, and he like fills a shell with them and shoots at them with the
Oh
quarters.
yeah,
It's
that's true.
pretty ingenious if you think about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say it was a little bit underrated, even though it did get a few nominations for things. It didn't get a whole lot of love, like I think they were hoping. But what is your next pick?
So my next choice is from 1948, and it is called Key Largo. This stars a lot of great actors from the late 40s and early 50s. Humphrey Bogart, Edward G. Robinson, Lauren Bacall, and Lionel Barrymore, among others. And it tells the story of a war veteran who is going to his war buddy's hotel in Key Largo, Florida. The GI is played by Humphrey Bogart. Just as he's arriving, a pretty well-known gangster named Johnny Rocco, played by Edward G. Robinson, shows up and pretty much takes the entire hotel hostage because he's on the run. And then just as everything is about to get hit a fever pitch, a hurricane happens because it's Florida. It's Florida, and hurricanes happen like just feels like all the time. They should have waited 5 minutes and the weather changed. But the movie is really good, especially considering it was directed by John Huston, who was known for Treasure of the Sierra Madre and directing African Queen and The Maltese Falcon. Worked a really long time with Humphrey Bogart and just directed him in so many quality movies throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is one that never gets talked about and is subtly really good because up until I want to say Maltese Falcon, Humphrey Bogart actually played more villainous characters, and I think it was around the end of the war where he finally became the protagonist in most of the movies that he was in. He's definitely more of the babyface here, and he does a really good job. He doesn't take any of the crap from any of the gangsters because he knows that they're in a rough situation, but he's not going to compromise himself for anything. Edward G. Robinson plays Edward G. Robinson. He's a really great actor, but he he got very well typecast as like the now look here, see, I'm the gangster around here, see. Like if you were to think a stereotypical gangster and close your eyes, Edward G. Robinson's face would appear. But that
Mhm.
doesn't change the fact that he was a great actor and he was really good here. Lauren
Mhm.
Bacall was great as well. Bogey and Bacall, I believe they were married at one time, if my memory serves me right.
Mhm.
They starred in a
Yeah.
lot of movies together.
Yeah. They had such great chemistry, and I haven't seen this since I was in college, so it's been a long, long time. But I remember enjoying it and thinking it had really good atmosphere and did that film noir thing real well. So yeah, I think that's a good pick. All right. Well, my next pick is one I thought might be fun for Halloween if you want to watch a movie that I don't know, kind of has monster themes but isn't actually scary. And to watch Warm Bodies, I think would be a fun kind of movie because it's a love story about a girl who falls in love with a zombie, which is fun. And it's actually quite charming, the movie with Nicholas Hoult, Teresa Palmer, John Malkovich is in it. So it has a fun cast, and so I think if you're looking for something that you could watch on Halloween that isn't scary at all, but you know, like I said, has monsters. The director did 50-50 and Long Shot, and so he's good at doing these kind of, whether it's a kind of warm-hearted with a touch of sadness, kind of, I don't know, 50-50s like more of a bromance, but kind of romance slash romance slash things. So yeah, it's a pretty good movie. Have you seen it?
Yes, I have. I was going to say this was directed by Greg Berlanti, and it turns out no, it was actually directed by Jonathan Levine. So I was thinking, oh, didn't he also direct Love, Simon? But that was Greg Berlanti, and I was confusing the two. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I saw this, and this was one of those movies that I was like, oh, great, like because the Twilight craze had just ended, and so I'm like, they ruined vampires, now they're gonna ruin zombies. Awesome. And then I walked out of there like, was that actually good? And it turns out, yes, it was, because I actually liked the relationship between
Yeah,
Nicholas Hoult and Teresa Palmer. They actually
yeah,
had very nice scenes together, and I like the concept of a zombie, even though he's a zombie, recognize or regaining a little bit of his humanity. It's a theme that's actually explored weirdly enough in Blade Runner with the question of are replicants becoming more human than the humans who created them? It's a
yeah. I can see that.
weird
Yeah,
tangent, but that's what I gleaned from it.
I can see that. I can see that. What is your next pick?
So my next choice is from the 1960s. I believe it's 1964, and this is a bit of walking the tightrope, but it's a Hard Day's Night. This is essentially the Beatles movie. This is essentially the narrative in this is very loose, but I recommend this movie as a window into Beatlemania that hit in the early 60s because the Beatles are a big deal now, but everything that I've seen about documentaries and books I've read are just showing that the Beatles were just the biggest thing ever. Everywhere they went, they were just swathed by just fans and women and just everything. They were the hottest ticket in town. You could put the Beatles on like any sign anywhere and it would immediately sell out. And Hard Day's Night was shot at the height of their powers. And if you've at least heard the song, the video that accompanies it is the opening scene of this movie where they sing, "It's been a hard day's night and I've been working like a dog," and they're running away from all of the girls chasing after them. It's my favorite scene of the movie. I've seen that video like 100,000 times and it never gets old to me. And mostly, this movie is not exactly like a tour de force of acting. It's essentially the Beatles just kind of being themselves, I feel like. There's a scene where I believe it's either George or Ringo is just kind of walking along hungover and they kept it in. But
Mhm.
I recommend this as a piece of history because, like I said, the Beatles were just the hottest thing going throughout like 63 to 65 or 6. Like they had a pretty decent sized run where they were selling out arenas everywhere. And A Hard Day's Night was a microcosm of their success.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good film, very iconic. We reviewed it for Criterion Project, and I do feel like whenever they actually tried to give it a plot, it doesn't work very
The
well.
the plot is loose at best.
Hmm. Yeah, and they're not like the best actors when they are, in the few parts where they're required to do so. But it's still, I think, entertaining and enjoyable. So good pick. My next pick is another documentary, another docu-series. It is called What Happened, Britney Murphy. And this goes into the tragic passing away of Britney Murphy. And it's basically like a true crime docu-series about the kind of strange circumstances surrounding her passing, and particularly her husband and her mother, some strange behavior that they were exhibiting. And I actually haven't finished it yet. I've just watched the first episode, but I thought it was really interesting as somebody who, Clueless is a big foundation movie for me. It's a movie I've seen many, 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 many times. I was very sad, of course, when Brittany Murphy passed away. And then the more I sort of read and realized, the more like strange it became. So I was very interested to watch this docu series, and I'm going to be interested to watch the rest of the episodes. So yeah. What do you have next?
So my next choice is uh, is from 2005, and it was called I Am Legend. And this is a movie that I think it's overly hated, and I can see why, especially because of the ending, which I won't spoil if for some reason you've never seen it. But it's adapted from the book of the same name, I Am Legend. It tells the story of Robert Neville, played by Will Smith, who is seemingly the last man on Earth. And by day, he tries to keep himself busy with his dog. He does these various errands. He goes around New York and does these other things, supply runs and such. Keeps the radios open and free and trying to keep communication going. But at night, he is working on a cure for the plague that has wiped out seemingly all of humanity. But at night, the vampires are out and they are very hungry. Let's just say that. I actually rewatched this because during my Scary Mania series, I covered The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price, and they're based off the same book. So I was trying to see if maybe one was better than the other. And while I love Vincent Price, I actually prefer I Am Legend just a little bit more. There's more heart there. There's a lot of gut wrenching scenes, like the last scene between Robert Neville and his family. Again, no spoilers, but it's pretty devastating. I'm a cat
Or
person, but the dog's death
oh, I
gets
was
me
going to say,
every single time. I'm a cat
yeah.
person, but I'm just like, Oh,
That
I can
dog
never
scene, yeah.
listen to Bob
Oh,
Marley ever
oh,
again. And and like I said, I'm not blind to the fact that the ending is not the best. Like, like I do understand that. However, I think the rest of the movie is actually quite good, especially after the dog's death and Will Smith just kind of completely loses his mind. He just like shooting at random things. It's it's nuts, but it's also
mm.
I think this movie gets overly hated. I actually quite like it.
The thing about this movie is that I think what maybe, at least for me, is frustrating and maybe for some other people, is that it's so good for so long. And
Yeah,
then, I mean, and so that kind of makes it more frustrating than if it was just kind of like a solid, base hit kind of movie. It's so good, especially like the first 20 minutes. I mean, every time he goes around a corner, it's like the tension and how quiet the movie is, and you don't know what's happening. And then as soon as you see the 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 creatures, I guess, for lack of a better word, it just drains so much of what was so good for so long. And that last third is just oh, so frustrating. And I think that's why it does maybe get hated, because like I'd still recommend the film. I would still give it a positive review, but it was just frustrating because it was so good for so long. And then oh, darn it.
yeah. What's
So
your thoughts on the alternate ending?
I if I have seen it, it's been a long time, so I don't know.
Well, I think the alternate ending is actually not too bad. I actually
Okay.
haven't watched it in a terribly long time, but when I remember watching it for the first time, I was like, wow, why didn't they just keep that? Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I haven't seen it for a while, so maybe I'll just have to see it again. But like I said, this movie I think gets overly hated. The last third is disappointing, but the first two thirds are genuinely great. I especially love the opening where
Oh, the opening's so good.
where Will Smith is hunting the deer in his Mustang and he finally gets like a bead on it, and then the lion comes out and eats it, and he's like, and then he like,
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that the reason why is because that first two thirds is so good, and so it feels like such a letdown, and so I think that's why people in the end kind of feel really disappointed, because it was just like it's one thing. It's like going on. You could just go on just sort of like an average date and be fine, and not memorable. Then you go on one that's like starting so great, and then it just and it's so disappointing. Like it's way more disappointing than something that's just but anyway, I think that's the reason. But I would still recommend it, as I said. So
yeah,
my last recommendation is actually from Blue Sky, and this is a very underrated film in my opinion. It is Robots, and this movie is a beautifully animated film. It looks great. The world building, the attention to detail in every single aspect of this robot world is so creative, and really the story is basically the same thing that Zootopia did, over a decade later, but they did it in 2005. And you look at the quality of the animation, it's right up there with the best that Pixar was doing at that time, if not better. And I'm not sure why this got just completely ignored by everybody, it seems like. And it's got a great voice cast. I mean, the villain's kind of lame, but I don't know. I think it's really good, and it's got Robin Williams and Ewan McGregor, and I love the scene when they are building their robot. They get the robot in a box, and when they get the baby, I love that whole scene. It's so creative.
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't quite get why um, this was just kind of ignored. Maybe just because it wasn't Disney. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand why either. I love this movie to pieces. There's so many imaginative moments, like when there's this one where the Ewan McGregor robot, I can't remember his name right now, and the Robin Williams bot are fighting over something, and they get down this highway, and like they get into this chase, and this chase is so much fun. I watched it like 100 times when I like rented it from the library when I was a kid. I would just watch that scene over and over and over again. It was so cool. And then there's these little moments like when the Ewan McGregor bot was kicked out of Big Weld's factory because the corporate guy had taken over and kicked him out, and he was on the magnet, and the guard was like, "So how'd it go?" And he was like, "You don't understand." And then there's still magnet stuff like stuck on him, so he's like, "This jerk is sitting in Big Weld's chair," and he's fighting against the magnetism. It's far funnier than I'm describing it, but it is really funny. And yeah, like you said, this movie got forgotten, and I don't know why. It's definitely some Blue Sky's best work.
Yeah, I think so. And really, I mean, if you look at the message of the story, it's the same message as Utopia about how we treat people that are different, and it's a message of tolerance and racism and overcoming racism and things like that. So I don't know, very interesting. But what is your last pick?
Well, before I do, I'll say you can shine no matter what you're made of.
That's right.
So my final pick is it was originally going to be Corpse Bride, but we actually covered that in another podcast. So I changed it around to Trick or Treat. This is from 2007. It was directed by Michael Dougherty, who I believe did something recently. I'll have to double check, but I think he may have worked on an X-Men movie. Like I said, I'll look later, but this is an anthology movie about four separate stories that take place on one Halloween night, and it all centers around this little I want to call it demon boy thing with a sack on his head and kills people with lollipops. It makes sense in the movie, I promise. And this is one of those movies that when I think of Halloween in terms of ambiance and just candy and the chill in the air and the kids wearing costumes and just the general din of kids running around like, ah, Trick or Treat is what I think of. And there's definitely some near the knuckle stuff in here. I believe this is rated R. But I think of like Halloween ambiance from Trick or Treat. It's made up of four separate stories. One of the stories is a high school principal who is secretly a serial killer. Anna Paquin finds a man that he likes, but he has a dark secret. The little sack boy finds a recluse old man, and they have a fight. It's awesome in the movie, I promise. And I feel like it's a caveat of what I'm describing may be a tad silly, but in the context of the movie, it's really great. And I love the Twilight Zone. I love the Outer Limits. So maybe I just have a soft spot for anthology stories. But I watch this movie every year around Halloween time, and it just gets me in the mood. Like chill in the air, candy, the costumes, the scares, just everything in between.
Yeah, I've actually heard from quite a few of my friends that really like this one and say it's a pretty good gateway horror, like not too traumatic,
Yeah,
too gory.
absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people. So there we go. We did it. We gave our recommendations for HBO Max, and we talked about Dune. So let us know what you think in the comment section about any of these films we talked about, or HBO Max, or Dune. Love to hear your thoughts. And I would also be curious to know if you went out to see Dune or you watched it at home on HBO Max. So let me know. I know that we like to promote seeing things on the big screen and supporting theaters, but I can also see an argument for Dune because it is so complex and wanting to take your time with it. I can see an argument for that, but hopefully maybe you get to see it both ways. But let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So Ryan, where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. And there's, of course, my YouTube channel, which is just called Ryan Cam. By the time this airs, Scary Mania will be wrapping up. We're recording this on Wednesday night, which means my review for Van Helsing from 2004 will be up, which I did a collab with Brevin over at Brevin's Flicks and Games. The next day will be Drag Me to Hell. Then it'll be Insidious, The Conjuring, and Lights Out, and that'll be the end of Scary Mania 2. Scary Mania 2 will be in the books. 31 more horror movie reviews on all 31 days of October. And then November is going to be a bit of a catch-up month for me. I'm going to be doing my definitive Villeneuve ranking in honor of Dune, and I'll also be talking about the Craig Bond movies and my ranking for that as well. And then I have big plans for December. They're still in the works, but I'll be announcing those very soon. Also, plan on seeing a few more new releases like House of Gucci in November and Belfast if it comes near me, hopefully. And I'll also be closing out Studio Ghibli. I will have seen all of Studio Ghibli's movies at the end of November. So that's all coming to the channel. If you'd like to check me out, please do.
Yeah, definitely. Y'all should subscribe. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please take a look at that. I have my review of Eternals up. I just posted that yesterday, so take a look. And make sure you're following. If you like this video, please, if you like this episode, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. And also check out the iTunes feed. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We really appreciate that so much. Also, check out the Hallmarkies podcast. Got lots of stuff going on over there. Lots of fun stuff. Check out the merch store. We have a sale on right now. You can get #Animation Junkie shirts and smile-worthy, frown-worthy gear. Also have the patron group, which is really fun. You get a chance to be a part of the decision-making of the podcast, the Facebook group, and also the watch-alongs. So take a look at that. I'd really appreciate it. So thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.
May Sam the doll leave you candy under your pillow on Halloween night.
Happy Halloween.